One of the country's most secretive businessmen decided to marry a charming woman, but his daughter seemed to see something that no one else did. On the eve of the wedding, the little girl secretly records a conversation that reveals a dark plan and a name that shouldn't be there. The ceremony turns into a public scandal when the child interrupts the I-do's with a devastating accusation. But the real shock was yet to come. Watch until the end. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The late spring sun cast long shadows across Manhattan's Upper East Side as Nathan Blackwood stepped out of his town car. At 45, with salt and pepper hair and the confident stride of a man who'd spent decades building his fortune, Nathan commanded respect in every room he entered. Today, however, standing outside Bergdorf Goodman waiting for his fiancée, he felt the familiar pang of uncertainty that had been his companion since Rebecca's disappearance 7 years ago. "Mr. Blackwood, would you like me to wait?" his driver asked. "No need, Thomas. I'll call when we're finished," Nathan replied, checking his watch. Inside the luxury department store, among the glittering displays and hushed conversations of the wealthy, he spotted them immediately: his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, her honey blonde hair in perfect ringlets, sitting primly on a velvet ottoman while his fiancée, Vivian Pierce, examined a selection of jewelry. Emma's face lit up when she saw him. "Daddy!" she called, rushing toward him with outstretched arms. Nathan scooped her up, inhaling the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "How's my princess today? Having fun with Vivian?" Emma's smile dimmed slightly. "She's looking at more jewelry. She says I need to learn about important things if I'm going to be a proper lady." Nathan set her down gently and approached Vivian, who turned with practiced grace. At 36, Vivian Pierce was the picture of sophistication: sleek, dark hair, emerald eyes, and the kind of poise that came from years as one of New York's most sought-after public relations executives. Her client list included celebrities, politicians, and the city's elite. When they'd met at a charity gala 18 months ago, Nathan had been instantly captivated. "Nathan, darling," she said, rising to kiss his cheek, "I was just showing Emma how to select proper accessories. A woman is judged by her attention to detail, isn't that right, sweetheart?" Emma nodded dutifully, but Nathan noticed she didn't meet Vivian's eyes. "We have the final tasting at the plaza in 30 minutes, Nathan reminded her. Vivian smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling in a way that had once seemed endearing but now struck Nathan as calculated. "Of course. Emma and I were just having a little girl time before the wedding chaos consumes us completely." As they made their way out of the store, Nathan couldn't ignore the subtle tension between his daughter and fiancé. It wasn't anything obvious. Vivian was unfailingly polite, attentive even, but Emma had grown increasingly withdrawn over the past few months as the wedding approached. The three of them slid into the back of a waiting taxi, Emma sandwiched between them. Nathan noticed how his daughter leaned slightly toward him, away from Vivian. The observation troubled him, another item on the growing list of concerns he'd been cataloging. At the plaza, they were ushered into a private dining room where the catering manager waited with an array of sample dishes. Vivian immediately took charge, directing questions about ingredients and presentation, while Nathan watched her work. She was magnificent in her element, commanding, precise, charming. It was what had drawn him to her initially, this assurance that felt like solid ground after years of uncertainty. "Mr. Blackwood," the manager addressed him, "we've prepared the selections you requested, including the chocolate cake that was Mrs. Blackwood's favorite." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Emma's eyes widened, and Nathan cleared his throat. "That was thoughtful but unnecessary," he said quietly. Vivian placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's all right, Nathan. Rebecca will always be part of your history, part of Emma's life. We don't need to pretend otherwise." Her words were perfect, her tone compassionate, yet something in her eyes, a fleeting hardness perhaps, made Nathan wonder if she meant them. Later that evening, after dropping Vivian at her penthouse apartment, Nathan and Emma returned to their brownstone on East 78th Street. Mrs. Hudson, their housekeeper since Emma was born, greeted them with warm cookies and a concerned smile. "Everything all right, Mr. Blackwood? You look troubled." "Just wedding jitters, I suppose," Nathan replied, though it wasn't entirely true. The nagging doubts had started months ago, small inconsistencies in Vivian's stories, unexplained absences, phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered a room. Individually, each incident seemed insignificant, but collectively, they formed a pattern he couldn't ignore. After tucking Emma into bed, Nathan retreated to his study, the one room in the house that remained untouched by Vivian's subtle redecoration efforts. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stared at the framed photograph on his desk. Rebecca, Emma, and himself on a beach in the Hamptons a lifetime ago. Rebecca had vanished without a trace 7 years earlier, leaving behind a 3-month-old Emma and a devastated husband. The police investigation had eventually gone cold. No body was ever found, no evidence of foul play, just a series of unanswered questions and a gaping hole in their lives. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Missing you already. Can't wait to be your wife in 3 days, V." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he opened his laptop and pulled up the email he'd received that morning from Jackson Monroe, the former intelligence officer he'd hired 2 months ago to look into Vivian's background. "Found something concerning, need to meet in person. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., usual place." Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his decision. He'd never intended to investigate the woman he planned to marry, but Emma's increasing discomfort and his own instincts had pushed him to seek answers. If he was wrong, if this was all paranoia born from past trauma, he'd never forgive himself for doubting Vivian. But if he was right, his phone rang, startling him. Vivian's name flashed on the screen. "Nathan?" Her voice was soft, concerned. "Is everything okay? You didn't respond to my text." "Sorry, I was putting Emma to bed. She asked about the wedding again." "And? What did she say?" Nathan hesitated. "She's still adjusting to the idea. It's a big change." Vivian sighed. "I've tried so hard. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever accept me." "She will," Nathan assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "It just takes time." "Well, we have the rest of our lives for that, don't we?" Vivian's tone lightened. "I have some exciting news. Montgomery called today. They want me to handle the crisis management for their merger. It's a huge account." "That's wonderful," Nathan said automatically. Montgomery Industries was one of his main competitors. "When did they approach you?" "Just today," Vivian replied smoothly. "Out of the blue. Apparently my work with the Harrington Foundation impressed their board." Nathan frowned. Montgomery had been involved in a bidding war with Blackwood Enterprises last year over a government contract, a bitter public battle that Nathan had ultimately won. The timing seemed suspicious. "Anyway," Vivian continued, "I thought I'd stop by Lewis & Sons tomorrow to check on your wedding gift. Any hints about what you've chosen?" "That would ruin the surprise," Nathan said, forcing lightness into his voice. He hadn't purchased anything from Lewis & Sons, the high-end jewelers, another small inconsistency to add to his growing list. After ending the call, Nathan returned to the photograph on his desk. Rebecca's smile seemed to hold a question, one he couldn't answer. He picked up his phone again and texted Jackson, "Confirmed for tomorrow. Bring everything you have." Upstairs, Emma lay awake, clutching the worn teddy bear that had once belonged to her mother. Through the heating vent near her bed, a secret passage for sounds from her father's study, she had heard fragments of his conversation. Her 7-year-old mind couldn't fully comprehend adult complexities, but she understood one thing clearly. Something was wrong with Vivian and her father was worried. Emma closed her eyes and whispered to her bear, "I wish Mommy was here. She would know what to do." In the darkness of her room, Emma didn't see the shadow that passed by her window, a figure that paused briefly, looking in, before disappearing into the night. The corner cafe on Lexington Avenue was nearly empty at 7:45 the next morning. Nathan chose a booth at the back, away from windows and casual observers. He'd been meeting Jackson Monroe here for weeks, appreciating the anonymity of the nondescript diner where Wall Street types rarely ventured. Jackson arrived precisely at 8, looking nothing like the elite private investigator he was. With his rumpled khakis, plaid shirt, and thinning hair, he resembled an overworked high school science teacher, more than a former intelligence officer. This unassuming appearance had served him well during his 15 years in government service. "Coffee, Black?" Jackson told the waitress, before sliding into the booth across from Nathan. He waited until she walked away before speaking again. "You look like hell, Blackwood." "Rough night," Nathan admitted. "What did you find?" Jackson placed a thin folder on the table. Nothing conclusive yet, but enough red flags to warrant concern. He opened the folder and pointed to a document. Vivian Pierce isn't exactly who she claims to be. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Meaning? Her background checks out superficially. Boston upbringing, Dartmouth education, PR career trajectory. But there are inconsistencies. For one, her name wasn't always Vivian Pierce. She was born Valerie Pearson and legally changed her name 12 years ago. That's not necessarily suspicious, Nathan reasoned. Many people change their names for professional reasons. True, Jackson conceded. But it's what happened before the name change that concerns me. Valerie Pearson seems to have materialized out of nowhere at age 24. I can't find high school records, childhood friends, nothing before her sudden appearance at Dartmouth with a suspicious scholarship from a foundation that dissolved the year after she graduated. Nathan frowned. That's odd. It gets more interesting, Jackson continued. I tracked her professional history. Before she established her PR firm, she worked briefly for 3 different wealthy men, all widowers or recently divorced, all with significant assets. He slid several photographs across the table. Thomas Harrington, Chicago real estate mogul. Martin Keller, tech entrepreneur from San Francisco. And James Whitfield, oil magnate from Houston. Nathan examined the photos, seeing Vivian, younger but unmistakable, alongside 3 different men at various social events. What happened with these relationships? Jackson's expression grew grave. All 3 men experienced significant financial losses shortly after becoming involved with her. Nothing illegal that I can trace, just surprisingly poor business decisions, asset transfers, and convenient prenuptial agreement modifications. The waitress returned with Jackson's coffee and refilled Nathan's cup. They fell silent until she left. There's more, Jackson said, lowering his voice. I've been monitoring her communications as requested. Most are what you'd expect, clients, wedding vendors, friends. But there's a pattern of calls to a burner phone, always from public locations, never from her apartment or office. The calls are brief, typically under 2 minutes. Nathan felt a cold dread settling in his chest. Could you trace the other number? Not yet. But I did manage to follow her yesterday after her lunch meeting. Jackson pulled out his phone and showed Nathan a series of photos. She went to Bryant Park, made a call, and 20 minutes later, met this man. The photo showed Vivian sitting on a park bench beside a handsome, dark-haired man in his 30s. They weren't touching, maintaining a careful distance that wouldn't attract attention, but their body language suggested intimacy. Did you get his name? Nathan asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Leo Davidson. Works as a financial advisor at Meridian Wealth Management. Jackson hesitated. The interesting part? Meridian handles accounts for several of Montgomery Industries' board members. Nathan sat back, pieces falling into place. Montgomery's sudden interest in Vivian's PR services made more sense now. What about her finances? She lives well beyond her means. The penthouse apartment, designer wardrobe, luxury vacations. Her declared income couldn't support that lifestyle. I found evidence of offshore accounts in the Caymans, regular transfers from shell companies. Jackson closed the folder. I need more time to build a complete picture, but my professional assessment, she's running some kind of elaborate scheme and you're the current target. Nathan stared into his coffee, processing this information. He thought about Emma's discomfort around Vivian, his own nagging doubts. The wedding's in 2 days, Jackson. I know. That's why I'm recommending you postpone. Give me another week to gather concrete evidence. I can't postpone without a compelling reason. The media coverage alone would be a nightmare. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. And if I'm wrong, if there's an innocent explanation for all this, I'll have destroyed my relationship for nothing. Jackson leaned forward. Then let me accelerate the investigation. I need access to your home when she's not there. There might be evidence in her personal belongings. No, Nathan interrupted. I won't invade her privacy that way. Keep monitoring her calls and movements, but nothing inside our home. Not yet. Time is running out, Nathan. I know, but I need absolute certainty before I make any decisions. Nathan checked his watch. I have to go. Emma has a dress fitting this morning, and I promised I'd be there. As they stood to leave, Jackson placed a hand on Nathan's arm. One more thing. I looked into Rebecca's disappearance. Nathan froze. That wasn't part of your assignment. I know, but something felt connected. The timing of Vivian entering your life, her pattern with other wealthy men, it made me curious. Jackson's expression was troubled. The original investigation had holes, Nathan, big ones. The detective assigned to the case retired suddenly 6 months after Rebecca vanished, moved to Florida with a surprisingly generous pension. What are you suggesting? I'm not sure yet, but I found something interesting. A woman matching Rebecca's description was admitted to a private clinic in Connecticut around the time she disappeared. The records were sealed, but I'm working on accessing them. Nathan felt lightheaded. For 7 years, he'd believed Rebecca had chosen to leave, unable to cope with motherhood or their marriage. The possibility that something else had happened, something connected to Vivian, was almost too painful to consider. Keep digging, he said quietly, but be careful. If Vivian is involved in something nefarious and realizes we're investigating, she might disappear before we get answers. Understood. I'll be in touch. Jackson left first, maintaining their protocol of staggered departures. Nathan remained at the table, staring at the folder Jackson had left behind. Inside was a photograph of Vivian and Leo embracing in what appeared to be a hotel corridor, their expressions intimate and conspiratorial. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 days ago, while Nathan had been in Boston on business. The betrayal stung, but it was the calculated nature of it that truly chilled him. How much of their relationship had been genuine? Had she ever cared for him at all? For Emma. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Hudson. Emma waiting for you, dress fitting in 30 minutes. Nathan tucked the folder into his briefcase and left the cafe, his mind racing. As he hailed a taxi, he didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street, or the woman in dark sunglasses watching him from behind the wheel. At the bridal boutique on Madison Avenue, Emma stood on a small platform, looking uncomfortable in a frilly flower girl dress while a seamstress made final adjustments. Her face brightened when she saw Nathan. "Daddy, do I have to wear this? It's itchy." Nathan smiled, pushing his troubling thoughts aside for his daughter's sake. "You look beautiful, princess. Just 2 more days, and then you can go back to your jeans and t-shirts." The boutique owner, a stylish woman in her 50s, approached with a garment bag. "Mr. Blackwood, we've completed the alterations on Miss Pierce's gown. Would you like to see it?" "The groom isn't supposed to see the dress before the wedding," came Vivian's voice from behind him. She stood in the doorway, stunning in a cream-colored suit, her hair swept into an elegant updo. "It's bad luck." Nathan turned, studying her face, searching for signs of deception behind her perfect smile. "I thought you had meetings all morning." "I rescheduled. This is more important." Vivian knelt beside Emma, adjusting the sash on her dress. "You look like a princess, sweetheart." Emma flinched almost imperceptibly at Vivian's touch. "Can I take it off now, please?" "In a minute, honey," Nathan said, his protective instincts flaring. He turned to Vivian. "Can we talk privately?" In a small sitting area away from the fitting rooms, Nathan chose his words carefully. "Is everything okay? You seem distracted lately." Vivian took his hand, her green eyes wide and earnest. "Wedding stress, that's all. And this new Montgomery account is demanding." She squeezed his fingers. "But in 2 days, I'll be Mrs. Nathan Blackwood, and everything will be perfect." Nathan nodded, maintaining his composure despite the turmoil within. "About Montgomery, it seems like an unusual coincidence, them approaching you right before our wedding." A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed Vivian's face before her professional mask returned. "Business is business, Nathan. Their timing might be strategic, but the opportunity is too good to pass up." She leaned closer, her perfume enveloping him. "Unless you'd prefer I decline." "No, of course not," Nathan said quickly. "Your career is important. I want us to start our marriage with complete transparency." Vivian's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Absolutely. No secrets between us." As they rejoined Emma, Nathan's phone vibrated with a text from Jackson. "Need to meet again. Tonight. Critical information about R." Nathan deleted the message, aware of Vivian watching him closely. Whatever Jackson had discovered about Rebecca would have to wait. For now, Nathan needed to maintain the illusion that everything was normal, that he was still the trusting fiancé counting down to their wedding day. But as he helped Emma change out of her flower girl dress, he made a silent promise to his daughter. He would protect her, no matter what truths emerged in the coming days. Emma Blackwood sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by a fortress of stuffed animals. At 7 years old, she possessed the remarkable perceptiveness that sometimes develops in children who've experienced early loss. Her father called it her special radar, the ability to sense when adults weren't being truthful. And right now, that radar was blaring like a fire alarm. "Mr. Whiskers," she addressed her favorite teddy bear seriously, "I think Vivian is a bad person." She arranged her audience of plush confidants in a semicircle. She pretends to be nice when Daddy's watching, but her eyes get cold when he looks away. Emma reached under her bed and pulled out a small pink journal with a heart-shaped lock, her birthday gift from Mrs. Hudson. "Her place for your special thoughts," the housekeeper had whispered when presenting it. Inside, Emma had been documenting evidence in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. 1. Vivian threw away the drawing I made for Daddy. 2. She calls me sweetheart, but never remembers I don't like strawberry ice cream. 3. She told Mrs. Hudson that my bedroom needs updating after the wedding. 4. She talks different on the phone when she thinks no one is listening. She made Daddy change his special pancakes recipe. The last item particularly bothered Emma. Sunday pancakes had been a tradition since before she could remember. Her father had told her it started when her mother was still with them. The thought that Vivian could so easily change something connected to her mother made Emma's chest hurt. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Emma, may I come in?" It was Mrs. Hudson. Emma quickly tucked the journal away. "Yes, Mrs. H." The housekeeper entered carrying a basket of freshly laundered clothes. At 62, Martha Hudson had been with the Blackwoods since before Emma was born. Her silver hair was always neatly pinned up, and her kind eyes missed nothing. "What's this council of advisors?" Mrs. Hudson asked, nodding toward the stuffed animals. "We're having an important meeting," Emma replied solemnly. Mrs. Hudson sat on the edge of the bed. "About the wedding?" Emma nodded, pulling Mr. Whiskers onto her lap. "Mrs. H, did you know my real mum?" The housekeeper's expression softened. "Yes, sweetheart, I worked for your parents for 2 years before you were born." "What was she like?" "Daddy doesn't talk about her much." Mrs. Hudson carefully folded a small sweater before answering. "Your mother was beautiful. You have her eyes, you know. She was smart and kind, and she loved music. She used to play the piano in the sitting room for hours." She smiled at a memory. "And she was brave, always standing up for what she believed was right." "Then why did she leave us?" The question came out smaller than Emma intended. Mrs. Hudson's hands stilled. "I don't believe she wanted to leave you, Emma. Sometimes grown-up things are complicated in ways that are hard to explain. Vivian says Mom probably had personal problems and couldn't handle being a mother." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, repeating words she'd overheard. Mrs. Hudson's expression tightened. "That's not true. Your mother adored you. I saw how she looked at you, how she sang to you every night." She took Emma's small hands in hers. "Don't let anyone tell you differently." Emma nodded, absorbing this. "Mrs. H, can I ask you something else?" "Anything, dear." "Is it wrong to spy on grown-ups if you think they're doing something bad?" The housekeeper looked startled. "That depends on what you mean by spying and what you think they're doing." Emma hesitated, then reached for her backpack, pulling out her father's old cell phone, the one he'd given her to play games on after upgrading his own device. "I saw Vivian doing something weird yesterday." Mrs. Hudson frowned. "What kind of weird?" "She was in Daddy's office when she thought everyone was asleep. She was taking pictures of his papers with her phone and typing messages to someone." Emma demonstrated with the old phone. "And she was calling someone my lion or something like that." The housekeeper's expression grew serious. "Did you tell your father?" Emma shook her head. "He's been so happy lately. And what if I'm wrong? What if it's just wedding stuff?" Mrs. Hudson seemed to be weighing her response carefully. "Emma, sometimes adults do things that seem strange but have simple explanations. But," she added, seeing Emma's face fall, "your feelings are important. If something doesn't seem right to you, you should trust that feeling. So I should tell Daddy?" "Yes," Mrs. Hudson said firmly. "Your father would want to know what you saw." Emma nodded, feeling both relieved and anxious. "Can you be there when I tell him, in case Vivian gets mad?" "Of course, sweetheart." Mrs. Hudson gave her a quick hug. "Now, I believe you have piano practice in 20 minutes. Why don't you get ready while I finish putting these clothes away?" After Mrs. Hudson left, Emma pulled out her journal again and added a new item to her evidence list. 6. Taking secret pictures of Daddy's work papers. She underlined it twice, then carefully locked the journal and returned it to its hiding place. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Emma peered over the banister to see her father greeting Jackson Monroe in the foyer. She recognized him from previous visits, the man who always brought donuts and called her kiddo. Her father had introduced him as an old friend helping with some business matters, but Emma suspected there was more to it. She crept halfway down the stairs, positioning herself where she could hear their conversation without being seen. "Need to talk privately," Jackson was saying, his voice low and urgent. "My study," her father replied, leading the way. Emma waited until they disappeared down the hallway, then silently descended the remaining stairs. Her piano lesson could wait. This seemed much more important. Outside her father's study, Emma pressed her ear against the heavy oak door. The men's voices were muffled but audible. "Clinic records confirm it," Jackson was saying. "A woman matching Rebecca's description was admitted under the name Rachel Bennett, suffering from injuries consistent with an assault. The admission date was 3 days after she disappeared." "That's impossible," her father responded, his voice strained. "The police found no evidence of foul play. And why wouldn't she contact me afterward?" According to the records, she had temporary memory loss from head trauma. By the time she recovered enough to be released, nearly a month had passed. "And then what? Where did she go? Why didn't she come home to us?" There was a pause before Jackson continued. "The discharge notes mention her fear that someone was watching her family and that she needed to stay away to keep them safe. Nathan, I think someone threatened her, possibly threatened you and Emma, to force her to disappear." Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was sure they could hear it through the door. Her mother hadn't abandoned them willingly. She'd been hurt and scared. "What does this have to do with Vivian?" her father asked, his voice barely audible now. "I'm still connecting those dots, but there's something else you need to see." A rustling of papers. "These are financial records showing transfers from a shell company associated with Vivian to an account in the Caymans. The account holder is listed as Leo Davidson." "Her lover," her father said flatly. "Yes, but he's more than that. Davidson worked briefly for Montgomery Industries 7 years ago, during the same period that Rebecca disappeared. You think he was involved? I think it's a hell of a coincidence that your fiancé is intimately connected to someone who has ties to both your business rival and the time frame of your wife's disappearance." Emma felt dizzy. The adults were using big words and talking about complicated things, but she understood enough. Her mother might be alive, and Vivian might be connected to why she'd disappeared. She was so absorbed in processing this information that she didn't hear footsteps approaching until it was too late. The study door swung open and she tumbled forward into the room. "Emma!" Her father looked shocked. "What are you doing?" I was just..." Emma stammered, looking between her father and Jackson, who seemed more amused than upset. "Eavesdropping is generally frowned upon, kiddo," Jackson said gently. Emma straightened her shoulders, deciding that honesty was her best option. "I want to know about my mom, and about Vivian." Her father exchanged a glance with Jackson before kneeling to her level. "Emma, these are very grown-up matters. I saw Vivian doing something bad," Emma blurted out. "Last night in your office. She was taking pictures of your work papers and sending them to someone, and she called them a funny name, My Lion or something." Nathan's face paled. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" She nodded vigorously. "She didn't know I was watching. I got up to get water and saw the light in your office." She was whispering on the phone. Jackson pulled out his notebook. "My lion? Could it have been my Leo, as in Leopold or Leonardo?" Emma considered this. "Maybe. It sounded like Leon to me." "Leo Davidson," Jackson murmured. "Nathan, this confirms they're working together." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, looking more stressed than Emma had ever seen him. "What exactly did you hear Vivian say, Emma?" "She said something like, the papers would be useful, and something about things being in her name soon, and then the My Lion part." Emma twisted her hands in her lap. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart." Her father pulled her into a tight hug. "You're not in trouble. In fact, you've been very brave and very helpful." "Is my mom really alive?" Emma asked, her voice small against her father's shoulder. Nathan pulled back, looking into her eyes. "I don't know for certain, Emma. Mr. Monroe is trying to find out." "And is Vivian a bad person? Is she trying to hurt us?" her father hesitated. "We don't know everything yet, but I promise you I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever." Jackson cleared his throat. "Nathan, given what Emma's told us, I think we need to accelerate our timeline. The wedding is tomorrow. If Vivian suspects we're onto her, she'll disappear like the others," Nathan finished. He looked at his daughter, making a decision. "Emma, I need you to do something very important. Can you be my special helper?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Tomorrow, during the wedding, I need you to stay close to Mrs. Hudson at all times. If anything seems wrong or scary, you go to her immediately. Can you promise me that?" "I promise, Daddy." Emma hesitated. "But what about you? What if Vivian tries to hurt you?" Nathan smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry about me. Mr. Monroe and I have a plan." As if on cue, the front door opened and Vivian's voice echoed through the foyer. "Nathan, Emma, where is everyone?" Jackson quickly gathered his papers. "I'll go out the back. Remember, text me if anything changes before tomorrow." Nathan nodded, then whispered to Emma, "Not a word about this to Vivian, okay? This is our secret mission." Emma mimicked, locking her lips and throwing away the key. As they left the study to greet Vivian, Emma felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Her mother might be alive, Vivian might be a villain in disguise. And tomorrow at the wedding, something big was going to happen. She just hoped her father's plan would work, whatever it was. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear over Manhattan, the June sky a perfect backdrop for what the society pages had dubbed the merger of the year. St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue was adorned with cascades of white roses and ivy. The sidewalk lined with photographers hoping to glimpse the city's elite arriving for the ceremony. Inside the church's private suite, Vivian Pierce stood before a full-length mirror, resplendent in a Vera Wang creation of silk and lace. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, dotted with pearl pins that caught the light as she moved. "You look absolutely stunning," gushed her maid of honor, Charlotte, adjusting the cathedral-length veil. Vivian smiled, but her eyes remained calculating as she checked her reflection. Everything had to be perfect today. 7 years of careful planning, of patiently weaving herself into Nathan Blackwood's life, would culminate in the next hour when she became Mrs. Blackwood and gained legal access to his considerable fortune. "Is Leo in position?" she asked quietly, ensuring the other bridesmaids were occupied with their makeup. Charlotte nodded. "He's seated in the back, left side, as planned. The documents are prepared for Monday morning, and the offshore accounts, ready to receive the transfers. Once the marriage is official, we can begin moving assets immediately." Vivian's smile widened. "Perfect. Within 6 months, we'll have liquidated enough to disappear completely. Nathan won't know what hit him until it's too late." A soft knock interrupted their conversation. The wedding planner poked her head in. 15 minutes, Miss Pierce. The groom has arrived and is in the vestry with his groomsmen." "Thank you, Melissa." Vivian's voice was honey-sweet, her transformation from conspirator to blushing bride seamless. When the door closed, she turned to Charlotte. "Remember, after the reception, make sure the jet is ready. If anything goes wrong, we implement the contingency plan." Charlotte nodded, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "What about the girl? She seems suspicious." "Emma?" Vivian's expression hardened. "Just a child. Besides, once I'm officially her stepmother, she'll be easily managed." She checked her diamond watch, a gift from Nathan. "Now help me with this veil." It's showtime. Across the church in a small anteroom, Emma sat on a velvet settee, uncomfortably aware of how the stiff tulle of her flower girl dress scratched her legs. Mrs. Hudson was fussing with her hair, pinning a wreath of baby's breath to her honey-blonde curls. "You look like a little angel," the housekeeper said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Emma frowned. "I don't want Daddy to marry her, Mrs. H." Mrs. Hudson glanced toward the door before responding in a hushed tone. "Your father knows what he's doing, Emma. Remember what he told you this morning?" Emma nodded, recalling her father's words as he'd helped her pack a small overnight bag. "Just in case," he'd said. "Trust me, follow the plan and stay close to Mrs. Hudson." A knock at the door announced Nathan's arrival. He entered, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, though his eyes betrayed the strain of the past 24 hours. "There's my beautiful girl," he said, kneeling before Emma. "Ready for our big day?" Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. "Are you sure about the plan, Daddy?" she whispered. Nathan nodded imperceptibly. Everything's in place. Jackson is here and so are 2 of his colleagues. Just remember, if anything happens, anything at all that seems scary or wrong, you go straight to Mrs. Hudson. I will, Emma promised. Nathan turned to the housekeeper. Martha, if things go unexpectedly, you know what to do. Mrs. Hudson patted the small purse hanging from her wrist, which contained emergency contacts, cash, and the keys to a safe house Nathan had arranged. We'll be fine, Mr. Blackwood. You just focus on what you need to do. Another knock, more insistent this time. The wedding planner's voice called through the door. 5 minutes, everyone, Mr. Blackwood, you're needed at the altar. Nathan took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and gave Emma one last reassuring smile. It's going to be all right, Princess. I promise. As he left, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was about to happen. Something beyond her 7-year-old understanding, but important nonetheless. The church was filled to capacity, the murmur of 500 guests creating a soft backdrop to the string quartet's elegant melodies. Nathan stood at the altar, his best man and groomsmen flanking him, all seemingly unaware of the tension coursing through the groom. From his position, Nathan could see Jackson Monroe seated inconspicuously in a middle pew, dressed in a conservative suit that allowed him to blend with the Wall Street crowd. 2 other men, former colleagues from Jackson's intelligence days, were strategically positioned near the exits. Everything was in place for what Nathan hoped would be a controlled confrontation rather than a public spectacle. If his plan worked, he would expose Vivian's deception privately after the ceremony, but before the legal documents were signed. If not, well, Jackson had contingencies for that too. The music shifted, signaling the start of the procession. The guests rose as the bridesmaids began their measured walk down the aisle, followed by a beaming Emma, scattering rose petals with more enthusiasm than precision. When she reached the altar, Emma took her place opposite the bridesmaids, her small face solemn as she watched the back of the church where Vivian would soon appear. The wedding march began, and the congregation turned expectantly. Vivian emerged, a vision in white on the arm of a distinguished older man she'd introduced as a beloved family friend, though Jackson's investigation had revealed him to be an actor hired for the occasion. As Vivian glided down the aisle, her eyes locked on Nathan's, her smile radiant and triumphant. Nathan forced himself to smile back, even as his mind catalogued every lie, every manipulation that had led to this moment. When she reached him, the minister began the traditional service. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Nathan's attention drifted momentarily to the back of the church, where he noticed a late arrival slipping into a seat, a woman in an elegant navy suit, her face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Something about her posture, the tilt of her head, triggered a memory so powerful that Nathan nearly faltered in his responses to the minister. It couldn't be. After 7 years, after everything Jackson had uncovered, could Rebecca be here witnessing this charade? The ceremony proceeded with the formal gravity of tradition. When the minister asked, "If anyone can show just cause why this couple should not be lawfully joined together, speak now or forever hold your peace." Nathan tensed, half expecting Jackson to stand. But the detective remained seated, adhering to their plan. The moment passed and the minister turned to Nathan. "Do you, Nathan James Blackwood, take Vivian Elizabeth Pierce to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" Nathan looked into Vivian's eyes, searching for any trace of the woman he'd thought he loved. Finding none, he answered steadily, "I do." The minister turned to Vivian. "And do you, Vivian Elizabeth Pierce, take Nathan James Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" Vivian's lips parted to respond when a high, clear voice rang out from beside the altar. "No!" Emma had stepped forward, her flower basket dropped at her feet, her small face flushed with determination. "She can't marry my daddy!" A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Nathan stared at his daughter in shock. This wasn't part of the plan. "Emma," he began, but she was already pulling something from the pocket of her dress. "She's lying to you, Daddy. She doesn't love you, she loves someone else. Emma held up her father's old cell phone. "I recorded her yesterday." Vivian's face drained of color. "What is this nonsense?" "Nathan, control your child." But Emma had already pressed play, and Vivian's voice filled the stunned silence of the church. "Everything's set for after the ceremony. Once the papers are signed, the transfers can begin." "Yes, we'll move the first assets on Monday. I know it's been a long game, but worth it. Don't worry, he doesn't suspect a thing. I love you too, my Leo." The recording ended, and for a moment, the church was utterly silent. Then murmurs began, swelling rapidly into a din of shocked exclamations and questions. Vivian recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "This is ridiculous. Clearly some childish prank manipulated audio. Nathan, surely you don't believe—" "I believe my daughter," Nathan said quietly, but firmly enough to carry in the now hushed church. "And I believe the evidence my investigator has gathered over the past 2 months." At this cue, Jackson stood, along with his 2 colleagues. "Ms. Pierce, I think it's time we had a conversation. Preferably somewhere private." Vivian's eyes darted around the church, calculating her options. Suddenly, she lunged for Emma, grabbing the child's arm. "Back off, or I swear." She never finished the threat. Mrs. Hudson, moving with surprising speed for her age, stepped between them, shielding Emma with her body. "Don't you dare touch her." The moment of confrontation was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the church. The woman in the navy suit had stood, removing her hat to reveal a face that, despite 7 years of absence, was immediately recognizable to everyone who knew her. "Rebecca," Nathan breathed, his world tilting on its axis. Emma's eyes widened. "Mommy?" Rebecca Blackwood started down the aisle, her gaze fixed on her daughter. Seeing this, Vivian made a desperate move, shoving past Mrs. Hudson and grabbing Emma roughly by the arm. "Stay back or I'll—" This time, it was Nathan who interrupted, catching Vivian's wrist in a grip that made her wince. "Let her go." Something in his voice, a cold fury she'd never heard before, made Vivian release Emma immediately. The child ran to Mrs. Hudson, who wrapped protective arms around her. "It's over, Vivian," Nathan said quietly. "Your plan, whatever it was, ends here." As if on cue, Jackson and his colleagues moved in, surrounding Vivian and effectively cutting off any escape route. At the same time, 2 uniformed police officers appeared at the church entrance, Jackson's final contingency. Vivian's composure cracked. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Nathan. This goes beyond me, beyond what you think you know." "We'll see about that," Jackson replied, nodding to the officers. "These gentlemen would like to ask you some questions about certain financial transactions, identity fraud, and harassment." As the officers approached, Vivian's gaze locked with Rebecca's, who had stopped halfway down the aisle. Something passed between the women. Recognition, certainly, but also something deeper, more visceral. "You," Vivian hissed. "You were supposed to be gone for good." Rebecca's voice, when she finally spoke, was steady, despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "I was never going to stay away forever. Not from my daughter. Not from the truth." The officers reached Vivian, one of them reciting her rights while the other gently but firmly took her arm. Jackson escorted them toward a side exit, away from the increasingly bewildered and agitated guests. Nathan stood frozen at the altar, unable to process the rapid unraveling of what should have been his wedding day. His fiancée was being led away by police. His supposedly long-gone wife was standing in the middle of the church. And his daughter, his brave, perceptive daughter, had just prevented what might have been a catastrophic mistake. Emma broke free from Mrs. Hudson and ran not to her father, but to the woman she barely remembered, except from photographs and dreams. "Mommy, is it really you?" Rebecca knelt, opening her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, baby. It's really me." As Emma fell into her mother's embrace, Nathan stepped down from the altar, moving toward them as if in a trance. Around them, the wedding guests watched in stunned silence, witnesses to a reunion no one could have anticipated, least of all the groom. The minister, clearly at a loss, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this somewhere more private." Nathan nodded absently, his eyes never leaving Rebecca and Emma. 7 years of questions, of grief and anger and confusion, crystallized into a single thought. She was alive. She was here. And nothing would ever be the same again. The elegant private dining room at the Pierre Hotel had not been prepared for this particular gathering. So originally reserved for the intimate family brunch that was to follow the Blackwood Pierce wedding, it now hosted a very different reunion. Nathan sat at one end of the mahogany table, his bow tie undone, jacket discarded, still processing the events of the past 2 hours. Across from him, Rebecca perched on the edge of her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Between them, Emma alternated between wide-eyed staring at her mother and nervous glances at her father. Mrs. Hudson busied herself pouring tea, while Jackson Monroe stood guard by the door, phone in hand, occasionally stepping outside to take calls regarding Vivian's processing at the police station. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Emma, with the directness only a child could muster, asked, "Why did you leave us, Mommy?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to, sweetheart. I was forced to go away to keep you safe." "From Vivian?" Emma asked. Rebecca nodded. "Yes, from Vivian, and the people she worked with." Nathan leaned forward. "I think it's time you told us everything, Rebecca. From the beginning." Rebecca took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the delicate handle of her teacup. "It started about 8 years ago, before Emma was born. I was working as a financial analyst at Meridian Wealth Management, the same firm where Leo Davidson works now," Jackson interjected from his position by the door. "Yes, Leo wasn't there then, but his uncle, William Davidson, was a senior partner." Rebecca's expression darkened. "William approached me about joining a special team handling exclusive client accounts. The pay was exceptional, the clients high profile. It seemed like a career opportunity I couldn't pass up." "What kind of clients?" Nathan asked. "Wealthy individuals looking for creative asset management. At least that's how it was presented." Rebecca's voice grew quieter. "It wasn't until I was already involved that I realized what was really happening. They were identifying potential targets, affluent, often emotionally vulnerable people, and setting them up for systematic financial exploitation. Like what they tried to do to me," Nathan said. Rebecca nodded. "Exactly. When I figured out what was happening, I was already pregnant with Emma. I confronted William, told him I wanted out. That's when I met Vivian for the first time. She wasn't using that name then. She was Valerie Pearson, William's protégé. And lover," Jackson added, consulting his notes. "According to my sources, they were involved for years before she started targeting high-net-worth individuals directly." "Yes, they were involved, though I think it was more transactional than romantic," Rebecca confirmed. "William was grooming her to take over his operation. When I threatened to expose them, they made it clear that my family would suffer the consequences." Nathan's expression hardened. "Why didn't you come to me? We could have fought them together." Rebecca's eyes met his, full of regret and unspoken pain. "They had photographs of you and Emma, taken outside your office at her daycare. William showed me files on your company, details no outsider should have known. He said they had people inside your organization, that nowhere would be safe if I didn't cooperate. So you just disappeared." The hurt in Nathan's voice was palpable. "Not immediately. I tried to find evidence, something concrete I could take to the authorities. That's when Vivian confronted me in our home, while you were on a business trip to Chicago. She said if I didn't disappear within 24 hours, Emma would..." Rebecca's voice broke. She described in detail how they would hurt our daughter. I believed her. Emma, who had been listening intently, reached for her mother's hand. The simple gesture of comfort from a child to her long-absent parent brought fresh tears to Rebecca's eyes. "What happened next?" Jackson prompted gently. "I packed a bag, withdrew cash from an account you didn't know about, money from my grandmother's inheritance, and left a note saying I needed time away." Rebecca looked at Nathan. "I never meant for you to think I'd abandoned you permanently. I planned to gather evidence from a safe distance, then return when I could protect you both. But something went wrong," Nathan guessed. Rebecca nodded. "They were watching me. 3 days after I left, someone ran me off the road near Hartford. The next thing I remember is waking up in a private clinic with a concussion and broken ribs. The Connecticut clinic in Jackson's report," Nathan murmured. "Yes, I was admitted under a false name. The ID was arranged by a nurse who believed I was fleeing domestic violence. By the time I recovered enough to leave, nearly a month had passed. I tried to call you but discovered my phone had been wiped clean of contacts. When I finally reached our home number from a payphone, a woman answered. "Vivian," Nathan said grimly. "She wasn't living there yet. just helping out with Emma, according to her. She told me you were devastated, that Emma was finally adjusting and that my return would only traumatize her further. Rebecca's voice hardened. She also reminded me of the threats against Emma, said they were still watching and always would be. Mrs. Hudson, who had been silent throughout Rebecca's story, suddenly spoke up. I remember when that woman first appeared, offering to help with Emma, bringing meals, always so concerned about Mr. Blackwood's well-being. I never trusted her, but I couldn't put my finger on why. She was playing the long game, Jackson said, rejoining the conversation. Based on the evidence we've gathered, Vivian spent nearly 2 years cultivating her relationship with Nathan before they became romantically involved. Classic predatory patience. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process everything. So for 7 years you've been what? Hiding, watching us from a distance. At first I was just trying to stay alive, Rebecca admitted. I changed my name, moved to a small town in Vermont, took whatever jobs I could find that paid in cash. I was terrified that they'd find me if I tried to access my old accounts or contact anyone from my previous life. But you never stopped looking for a way back to us, Emma said with certainty beyond her years. Rebecca smiled sadly at her daughter. Never. About 3 years ago, I felt secure enough to start investigating William Davidson and his network more actively. I discovered he'd retired suddenly, transferred his operation to others, including Vivian and Leo, who appears to be William's nephew and heir apparent. That tracks with what we found, Jackson confirmed. Davidson disappeared from public view around that time, though his money continues to move through various offshore entities. I started following Vivian's career from a distance, Rebecca continued. When I read about her engagement to Nathan in the Wall Street Journal, I knew I had to intervene somehow. I'd gathered enough evidence by then to at least cast doubt on her identity, but I wasn't sure how to present it without putting you both at risk again. So you sent the anonymous tip to my office, Nathan realized. The email that prompted me to hire Jackson. Rebecca nodded. I couldn't approach you directly. I wasn't sure who among your staff might be reporting to Vivian. The tip was vague enough that if it reached her, she wouldn't necessarily connect it to me. Emma, who had been following the conversation with intense concentration, suddenly asked, "But how did you know to come to the wedding today? And how did you know exactly when to show up?" A small smile crossed Rebecca's face. "That was thanks to your Mrs. Hudson, actually." All eyes turned to the housekeeper, who blushed slightly. "I may have done a bit of detective work myself," she admitted. "When Mr. Blackwood hired Mr. Monroe, I suspected something serious was happening. After Emma told me about Vivian's secretive behavior, I decided to look through some old photographs, specifically ones from before Mrs. Blackwood's disappearance. Martha has an exceptional memory for details," Rebecca explained. "She recognized me at a grocery store in Connecticut 3 months ago, despite my changed appearance." Mrs. Hudson nodded. "I was visiting my sister in New Haven. I saw a woman selecting apples who moved just like Mrs. Blackwood, the same way of tilting her head, the same careful inspection of each fruit. When she turned, I knew immediately, despite the different hair color and glasses. You approached me in the parking lot," Rebecca continued. "Asked if I remembered you, if I was ready to come home. After the initial shock, we arranged to meet somewhere private, and Martha filled me in on everything that had happened, including Nathan's engagement." "You've been in contact for 3 months?" Nathan asked, looking between the two women with disbelief. "I swore Martha to secrecy until I could determine the extent of the danger," Rebecca explained. "We needed to understand exactly what Vivian was planning before I revealed myself. And you didn't think to include me in these discussions?" Nathan's voice carried an edge of hurt and anger. Mrs. Hudson straightened her shoulders. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, we weren't certain how you would react. You were engaged to marry another woman. We needed to be sure you would believe Mrs. Blackwood's story before potentially putting her and Emma at risk again. I sent Martha evidence I'd gathered about William Davidson's operation and Vivian's previous identities," Rebecca added. "She passed some of it anonymously to Jackson to help his investigation without revealing my existence." Jackson nodded confirmation. Those Connecticut clinic records came at a crucial moment. They gave us the first concrete link between Vivian and Rebecca's disappearance. Nathan absorbed this information in silence, his expression unreadable. Finally, he asked, "And today, how did you coordinate your dramatic entrance?" "That wasn't planned," Rebecca admitted. I was simply going to observe from a distance, see if Jackson's team managed to prevent the marriage without my intervention. Martha had told me about the recording Emma had made, about your plan to confront Vivian privately after the ceremony. But then I yelled no and showed everyone the recording, Emma said, looking somewhat pleased with herself despite the gravity of the situation. Rebecca smiled at her daughter. You forced my hand, sweetheart. When I saw Vivian's reaction, how she reached for you, I couldn't stay hidden any longer. You did exactly the right thing, Emma, Nathan assured her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. You were incredibly brave. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jackson opened it to reveal one of his colleagues, who whispered something in his ear before departing again. Update on Vivian, Jackson announced, returning to the table. She's been formally charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and harassment. The evidence from Emma's recording, combined with the financial documents we've gathered, was enough for preliminary charges. They're holding her without bail pending further investigation. What about Leo Davidson? Nathan asked, in custody as well. They picked him up trying to board a private jet at Teterboro Airport about an hour ago. Had quite a collection of passports and financial documents with him. He's already offering to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Rebecca's shoulders sagged with visible relief. So it's really over? The immediate threat, yes, Jackson cautioned. But based on what you've told us about William Davidson and the scale of this operation, there may be others involved who aren't yet on our radar. Nathan turned to Rebecca, really looking at her for the first time since her dramatic reappearance. 7 years had changed them both. The young financial analyst with the ready laugh and ambitious career plans had been replaced by a more cautious, weathered woman. Yet her eyes, those hazel eyes that Emma had inherited, remained the same. What happens now? He asked quietly. Rebecca hesitated. I don't expect to simply walk back into your lives after 7 years. I know you've both moved on, built a life without me. I just want, she looked at Emma. I want to know my daughter if you will allow it. Emma looked between her parents, the weight of adult complexity visible in her young face. Can't we all just be together again? Like before? The simple question hung in the air, unanswerable in its childish optimism. Nathan and Rebecca exchanged a glance that acknowledged the impossibility of turning back time, of erasing 7 years of separation and the changes those years had wrought. It's not that simple, sweetheart, Nathan began gently. Why not? Emma persisted. Vivian's gone, Mommy's back. Why can't we just be a family again? Mrs. Hudson tactfully rose from her chair. Perhaps Emma and I should step out for a bit. I believe there's an ice cream parlor in the lobby. Ice cream sounds excellent, Jackson agreed, quickly following her lead. I could use some air myself. As they left, Nathan and Rebecca found themselves alone for the first time in 7 years, the weight of their shared past and uncertain future hanging between them. She has your determination, Rebecca said softly, breaking the silence. And your insight, Nathan replied. She saw through Vivian long before I did. Another silence fell, filled with unasked questions and unexpressed emotions. Finally, Nathan spoke the words that had haunted him for 7 years. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? To let me help you fight them? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you both. They made it clear what would happen if I involved you. I thought I was protecting you, Nathan. I thought I was keeping Emma safe. Maybe I was wrong, but I made the only choice I could see at the time. Nathan closed his eyes, absorbing her words. When he opened them again, his expression had softened slightly. What do you want, Rebecca? Really want now that the immediate danger has passed? She considered the question carefully before answering. I want to know my daughter. I want to make up for the years I've missed, if that's even possible. And I want... She hesitated. I want to see if there's anything left between us worth salvaging. Not for Emma's sake, but for our own. Nathan nodded slowly. I think we owe ourselves that much at least, to see what's possible. He glanced toward the door. But Emma comes first. Whatever happens between us, we need to make this transition as gentle for her as possible. Agreed, Rebecca said firmly. We take it one day at a time with no promises or expectations beyond doing what's best for her. A tentative understanding reached. They sat in more comfortable silence until Emma returned, ice cream smeared across her cheek. her eyes bright with the simple joy of having both parents in the same room for the first time in her memory. Looking at her, Nathan and Rebecca shared a moment of perfect clarity. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever wounds needed healing, they would find a way forward for Emma's sake, and perhaps, eventually, for their own. 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, Nathan stood at the window of his Manhattan office, watching the summer rain transform the city streets into mirrors, reflecting the neon and steel of the urban landscape. Behind him, Jackson Monroe was delivering his final report, a comprehensive dossier that had grown to nearly 300 pages. The operation was more extensive than we initially thought, Jackson explained, spreading photographs across Nathan's desk. William Davidson created a sophisticated network spanning at least 3 countries. Vivian Pierce, or Valerie Pearson, or any of her other 5 identities, was just one operative among several. Nathan turned from the window. How many victims? Confirmed? 23 over the past decade. All wealthy individuals, most emotionally vulnerable in some way. Recent widowers, divorcees with substantial settlements, lonely heirs to family fortunes. Jackson tapped a photograph of an elegant older woman. This is Claire Huntington, Boston socialite, targeted after her husband's passing. Lost nearly $40 million to a financial advisor who bore a striking resemblance to Leo Davidson, with different hair. Nathan examined the photos, recognizing patterns now that he knew what to look for: the calculated approaches, the gradual infiltration into victims' lives, the systematic dismantling of their support networks. What's happening with Vivian's case? Proceeding slowly. Her lawyers are claiming she was herself a victim, manipulated by Davidson and his associates. Jackson's expression suggested what he thought of this defense strategy. But the evidence is overwhelming, especially with Leo cooperating. He's provided details on at least a dozen other operations in exchange for consideration during sentencing. And William Davidson? Jackson frowned. That's where things get complicated. We've traced financial transfers to accounts in his name in Switzerland, the Caymans, and Singapore. But the man himself? Ghost. No confirmed sightings in over 3 years. Some sources suggest he may have undergone cosmetic surgery, assumed a new identity entirely. So he could still be out there, running things from the shadows. It's possible. Which is why I've recommended continued security for you, Emma, and Rebecca. Jackson hesitated. Speaking of Rebecca, how is that situation progressing? Nathan sighed, returning to the window. It's complicated. She's staying in the guest house at my Hampton property for now. Close enough for daily visits with Emma, but with enough distance to avoid rushing into anything premature. And Emma, how's she handling everything? A genuine smile crossed Nathan's face. Better than either of us expected. Kids are remarkably adaptable. She's thrilled to have her mother back, of course, but she's also processing the revelation that her perfect, almost stepmother was a fraud. Mrs. Hudson has been arranging sessions with a child psychologist, which seemed to be helping. And the media circus, Nathan grimaced. Exactly what you'd expect. Billionaire's bride revealed as con artist. Back from the dead. Wife returns at wedding altar. My PR team is working overtime, but it's been challenging. Jackson gathered his materials, sensing the conversation was winding down. For what it's worth, I think you're handling an impossible situation with remarkable grace. Not many men could navigate these waters without capsizing. I've had practice staying afloat in storms, Nathan replied dryly. Hazard of the industry. As Jackson prepared to leave, Nathan stopped him with a question. Do you think she's telling the whole truth? Rebecca, I mean. About why she stayed away so long, even after she knew Vivian was getting close to me. Jackson considered the question carefully. I believe she believes what she's told you. Whether there are aspects she's minimized or rationalized, that's harder to determine. Trauma and extended isolation affect people's perceptions, their memories. What matters is whether the core of her story holds up to scrutiny. And does it? The documented evidence supports her account. The clinic records, the accident report, the timing of her disappearance relative to William Davidson's operations, it all aligns. Beyond that, Jackson shrugged. That's between you and her. After Jackson departed, Nathan remained at the window watching the rain intensify. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Emma's piano recital at 4. She's nervous. Says she needs both of us there. Nathan smiled faintly, texting back, "Wouldn't miss it." Leaving the office now, the drive to Emma's private school in the chauffeur-driven town car gave Nathan time to reflect. 3 weeks had transformed his life completely, from nearly wed businessman to single father navigating an unprecedented family situation. The business repercussions had been manageable. His board, once briefed on the full situation, had rallied behind him. A few investors had expressed concerns, but the quick resolution of the Vivian situation had prevented any serious damage to Blackwood Enterprises. The personal repercussions, however, were still unfolding. At the school, Nathan found Rebecca waiting under the portico, sheltered from the rain. She wore a simple navy dress, her once dark hair now a honey blonde that softened her features. The physical changes she'd adopted during her years in hiding, the different hair color, the glasses she no longer needed, the altered style of dress, had gradually been reversed as she reclaimed her identity. "You made it," she said with a smile that held both warmth and uncertainty. "I promised, Emma," he replied, holding the door for her as they entered the building. They found seats in the auditorium, maintaining a careful distance that had become their unspoken protocol. Close enough to present a united front for Emma, far enough to acknowledge the boundaries still between them. "Mrs. Hudson called," Rebecca said quietly as they waited. "The decorators finished Emma's room today. She said everything looks wonderful." Nathan nodded. After much discussion, they had decided that Rebecca would move into the brownstone's third-floor guest suite, close enough to be fully present in Emma's life, but with private space that respected the current state of their relationship. "The security system upgrades are complete as well," Nathan added. "Jackson's team installed everything yesterday." Rebecca tensed slightly at the reminder of ongoing security concerns. "Have there been any indications that Davidson might still be a threat?" "Nothing concrete, but Jackson thinks it's prudent to maintain precautions until we know more." Their conversation paused as the recital began, a procession of well-dressed children performing simple pieces with varying degrees of proficiency. When Emma's turn came, she approached the piano with the solemn concentration that was so characteristic of her. Her piece, Mozart's 12 Variations on À vous dirai-je maman, was ambitious for a 7-year-old, but she had practiced relentlessly since Rebecca's return. As Emma played, occasionally glancing toward her parents with a small, proud smile, Nathan felt Rebecca's hand tentatively touch his. He hesitated only a moment before covering it with his own, a simple gesture of shared pride and cautious connection. After the recital, as other parents congratulated their children with flowers and enthusiastic praise, Emma rushed to Nathan and Rebecca with bright eyes. "Did you like it? I only missed 2 notes in the middle part." "You were magnificent," Rebecca assured her, kneeling to embrace her daughter. "Mozart himself would have been impressed." "Daddy?" Emma looked to Nathan for his assessment. "Absolutely perfect," he confirmed, joining the hug. For a moment they formed a circle of 3, a family tableau that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. The moment was interrupted by the approach of Emma's music teacher, Miss Chen, who praised Emma's performance and asked to speak with Nathan privately about an upcoming student showcase. As Nathan stepped aside with the teacher, Emma tugged Rebecca toward the refreshment table. "Can I have a cookie, Mom, Mrs.? Hudson said we're having a special dinner tonight, but I'm hungry now." Rebecca smiled at the casual mom, a title Emma had adopted almost immediately, despite having no real memories of using it before. "1 cookie. We don't want to ruin your appetite for Mrs. Hudson's special dinner." While Emma selected her treat, Rebecca became aware of hushed conversations nearby, parents glancing in her direction with poorly disguised curiosity. The story of the Blackwood wedding drama had been front-page news for days, making Rebecca an object of fascination in Manhattan's elite social circles. A woman in an expensive camel hair suit approached, extending her hand. "Rebecca Blackwood? I'm Diane Mercer, head of the Parents Association. We're so delighted to have you back in the school community." Rebecca accepted the handshake, recognizing the thinly veiled curiosity beneath the welcome. "Thank you. It's good to be back." "Such an extraordinary situation," Diane continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial tone. "When we all heard what happened at the wedding, well, it was like something from a movie. Poor Nathan must have been in shock." Before Rebecca could respond, Emma returned, cookie in hand. "Mom, can we show Dad my art project before we go?" It's hanging in the hallway. Of course, sweetheart. Rebecca nodded politely to Diane. If you'll excuse us. As they moved away, Emma looked up with surprising perception. That lady was being nosy, wasn't she? Like the reporters who wait outside our house. Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand. People are curious about unusual situations. It's natural. Mrs. Hudson says they're vultures feeding on other people's dramas, Emma reported matter-of-factly. Rebecca suppressed a smile. Mrs. Hudson has strong opinions. They found Nathan concluding his conversation with Ms. Chen. As they left the school together, a light rain was still falling, softening the harsh lines of the city. Cars waiting, Nathan said, nodding toward the black town car at the curb. And Mrs. Hudson texted, dinner will be ready at 6. The drive home was quiet. Emma nestled between her parents, occasionally breaking the silence with observations about her classmates' performances or questions about the evening ahead. Nathan and Rebecca exchanged glances over their daughter's head, their eyes communicating what words couldn't yet express: shared pride, lingering uncertainty, cautious hope. At the brownstone, Mrs. Hudson greeted them with the news that Rebecca's rooms were ready for inspection. While Emma rushed upstairs to change out of her recital dress, Nathan and Rebecca followed Mrs. Hudson to the 3rd floor. The suite had been transformed from its previous state as seldom-used guest quarters to a comfortable living space. The walls were painted a soft sage green, Rebecca's favorite color, as Mrs. Hudson had remembered. The furniture balanced modern comfort, with subtle echoes of Rebecca's preferred style from years ago. It's perfect, Martha, Rebecca said, visibly moved by the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. You remembered everything. Not everything is exactly the same, Mrs. Hudson noted. Some things should be new for this new chapter. She excused herself discreetly, leaving Nathan and Rebecca alone in the space that would become Rebecca's home within their home. Are you sure about this arrangement? Nathan asked quietly. It's not too late to consider alternatives. Rebecca moved to the window, which offered a view of the small garden behind the brownstone. I'm sure. This is where Emma is, where her life is established. And she hesitated. It's where you are. Nathan approached, maintaining a respectful distance. What happened between us, the way we lost each other? It wasn't clean or simple. There was no closure, no natural ending. Just a sudden absence and years of questions. And now? Rebecca turned to face him. Now we have different questions, different uncertainties. Nathan's expression was thoughtful. I'm not the same man you left behind, Rebecca. 7 years of raising Emma alone, of building the business, of learning to live with unanswered questions. It changes a person. I know. Just as 7 years of living in fear, of watching from a distance, of reinventing myself has changed me. Rebecca's voice was steady despite the emotion behind her words. I don't expect us to simply pick up where we left off. I don't think that's possible, or even desirable. What do you want then? A chance. The simplicity of her answer hung in the air between them. A chance to know you again, to see if what we once had, what we built together, can evolve into something new, something that honors our past without being imprisoned by it. Nathan nodded slowly. A chance. I think we can start there. From downstairs, Emma's voice called up, Dad, Mom, Mrs. Hudson says dinner's getting cold, and she made my favorite pasta. They shared a smile at the imperious summons. Duty calls, Nathan said, gesturing toward the door. As they descended the stairs together, the tension between them had shifted subtly, not resolved but transformed into something more navigable, more hopeful. In the dining room, Emma was already seated at the table, her recital forgotten as she focused on the steaming dish of baked ziti before her. Mrs. Hudson moved efficiently around them, serving salad and pouring drinks, her presence a comforting constant amid so much change. I was thinking, Emma announced as they began to eat, that maybe this weekend we could go to the house in the Hamptons, all of us together. The weather's supposed to be nice and I want to show Mom my shell collection. Nathan and Rebecca exchanged a glance. That sounds like a wonderful idea, Rebecca said carefully. If your father thinks it's a good time. I think it's perfect, Nathan agreed. We could all use some time away from the city, from the media attention. Emma beamed, clearly pleased with her successful manipulation of the situation. And can we invite Mr. Monroe? He likes the beach. He told me when he was helping with the security stuff. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Jackson? I'm not sure he'd be interested in a family weekend, Emma. But he's your friend now, right? And he helped bring Mom back. He should be included. Emma's logic, while simplistic, held a certain unassailable quality. We'll see, Nathan temporized, making a mental note to discuss with Rebecca later the delicate balance of maintaining appropriate boundaries while honoring Emma's desire to include those who had helped reunite her family. As dinner progressed, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in weeks. Emma regaled them with stories from school, Mrs. Hudson occasionally interjected with domestic updates or gentle corrections to Emma's more dramatic retellings, and Nathan found himself watching Rebecca, the way she listened intently to their daughter, the familiar tilt of her head when she was amused, the new confidence in her posture that hadn't been there 7 years ago. She caught him watching and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Not the guarded, careful expression she'd worn since her return, but something warmer, more genuine. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to resolved. But in that moment, surrounded by the tentative beginnings of their reconstructed family, Nathan allowed himself to feel something he'd almost forgotten: hope. The Hamptons' house stood on a private stretch of beach, its weathered cedar shingles and expansive windows embodying the relaxed luxury of coastal living. As Nathan parked the Range Rover in the circular drive, Emma unbuckled her seatbelt with eager anticipation. "Can I show Mom the beach right away? Please?" Nathan glanced at the darkening sky. "Let's get settled first, Princess. Looks like rain soon." Rebecca stepped out of the car, breathing in the salt-tinged air. "I'd forgotten how beautiful it is here." The house had been one of their first major purchases as a couple, a celebration of Nathan's early success with Blackwood Enterprises. They'd spent countless weekends here during the first years of their marriage, planning their future while walking the shoreline at sunset. Mrs. Hudson emerged from the caretaker's cottage, where she'd arrived earlier to prepare for their weekend. "Everything's ready inside. I've stocked the kitchen and aired out all the rooms." As they entered, Rebecca paused in the foyer, struck by the strange dichotomy of familiarity and foreignness. The bones of the house remained unchanged: the open concept living area, with its wall of ocean-facing windows, the stone fireplace, the spiral staircase leading to the upper bedrooms. But the furnishings had been updated. The color scheme shifted from the cool blues she'd chosen to warmer neutrals. "I had it redecorated about 3 years ago," Nathan explained, noticing her expression. "It needed refreshing." Rebecca nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. He'd needed to reclaim the space, to exorcise the memories that had become painful in her absence. Emma, oblivious to the emotional undercurrents, tugged at Rebecca's hand. "Come see my room. Dad let me pick the colors myself." The tour continued upstairs, where Emma proudly displayed her beach-themed bedroom with its mermaid lamps and shell collection meticulously arranged on floating shelves. Next was the master suite, which Nathan now indicated would be Rebecca's for the weekend. "I'll take the guest room down the hall," he said. "You'll be more comfortable here." The arrangement, practical, considerate, but undeniably separate, reflected the careful distance they continued to maintain. 3 months had passed since the wedding. That wasn't. A period of gradual adjustments and redefined boundaries. Rebecca had settled into the brownstone's third-floor suite, establishing a routine that centered primarily around rebuilding her relationship with Emma while giving Nathan the space he still seemed to need. After the house tour, while Mrs. Hudson prepared dinner and Emma sorted through her beach toys in anticipation of the next day's activities, Nathan and Rebecca found themselves alone on the deck, overlooking the ocean. A light rain had begun to fall, creating a misty veil between the house and the churning sea beyond. "Jackson called this morning," Nathan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "They've located another of William Davidson's associates, a woman operating in Seattle under the name Elaine Porter. She was targeting a tech entrepreneur whose wife passed away last year." Rebecca wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. "Do they think she'll cooperate? Reveal Davidson's whereabouts?" "Too soon to tell. She's not as forthcoming as Leo was." Nathan leaned against the railing. "But Jackson says the net is tightening. Every arrest brings them closer to Davidson." Rebecca nodded, her expression troubled. "I still worry sometimes that he's watching, waiting for the right moment to retaliate." The security measures are comprehensive, Rebecca. Between Jackson's team and the systems we've implemented, you and Emma are as protected as possible. I know. It's just hard to shake the habit of looking over my shoulder after so many years. She attempted a smile. But I'm working on it. Dr. Levine says hypervigilance is a normal response to prolonged trauma. Nathan studied her profile, noting the positive effects of the therapy she'd begun shortly after her return. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes was gradually receding, replaced by a quiet strength he found himself increasingly drawn to. Speaking of Dr. Levine, Rebecca continued, she suggested something during our last session that I wanted to discuss with you, away from the city when we had some time. I'm listening. Rebecca turned to face him fully. She thinks it might be beneficial for us to attend some sessions together. Not couples therapy exactly, but a space to process what happened, both the separation and the reunion, with professional guidance. Nathan considered this. 3 months ago, he might have dismissed the suggestion outright, too raw from the revelations surrounding Rebecca's disappearance and Vivian's betrayal to contemplate examining his feelings in a therapeutic setting. Now, the idea held a certain appeal. I think that makes sense, he said finally. We've been focused on helping Emma adjust, on the practical aspects of restructuring our lives. But the emotional component, that's more complicated. It is, Rebecca agreed. And I don't want to push you before you're ready. I just thought... No, you're right, Nathan interrupted gently. We can't move forward in whatever direction without addressing the past more directly. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the rhythm of rain on the deck and the distant sound of waves breaking on the shore. It was a different kind of silence than those that had characterized their early interactions after her return, less guarded, more contemplative. Inside, Emma's laughter rang out, followed by Mrs. Hudson's lower tones. The domestic sounds created a backdrop of normalcy that still felt slightly surreal to them both. She's thriving, Rebecca observed. Despite everything, she seems so well adjusted. Kids are resilient, Nathan replied. And she has what she needs most: stability, security, people who love her unconditionally. She has you, Rebecca said softly. You've been her constant. I can't express how grateful I am for that, Nathan. For the father you've been to her. The sincerity in her voice moved him. It wasn't always easy. Those first few years, there were times I felt completely inadequate, terrified I'd fail her. But you didn't. You created a wonderful life for her. I tried. Nathan's expression grew thoughtful. You know, for years I was angry with you. I thought you'd chosen to leave us. That motherhood or marriage had somehow been too much. I constructed this narrative where you were selfish, weak. Rebecca absorbed the painful words without flinching. That was a reasonable conclusion given what you knew. Maybe, but I was wrong. And I've been thinking lately about what it cost you, the sacrifice you made by staying away, believing it would keep us safe. Nathan's voice softened. I'm not sure I could have done it. Left everything behind, lived in isolation, carrying that burden alone for years. You would have, Rebecca said with certainty. For Emma, you would have done anything, just as I did. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them, the first since her return that felt completely unguarded. The sliding door opened, interrupting the moment. Emma bounded onto the deck, heedless of the light rain. Mrs. Hudson says dinner's almost ready. She made her famous crab cakes. We'll be right in, Nathan assured her, ruffling her hair affectionately. As Emma disappeared back inside, Rebecca hesitated. Nathan, before we go in, there's something else I wanted to discuss. Something I've been considering. What is it? I've been thinking about what comes next for me professionally. Before everything happened, I was building a career in financial analysis that I was proud of. I'd like to return to that field in some capacity. Nathan nodded encouragingly. I think that's a great idea. Have you looked into options? A few, but I'm rusty, and my employment history has a significant gap that's difficult to explain. She took a deep breath. I was wondering if you might consider, that is, if there might be a position at Blackwood Enterprises where my skills could be useful. Nathan looked surprised. You want to work for me? With you, Rebecca clarified. In a division where my financial background would be an asset, but not directly under your supervision. I understand if it's too complicated or inappropriate, given our situation. Nathan considered the proposition thoughtfully. Actually, our sustainable investment division is expanding. They could use someone with your analytical skills, especially your background in risk assessment. He smiled slightly. And Jennifer Oakes runs that department. You remember her? She's tough, brilliant, and wouldn't cut you any slack just because of our connection. Relief and gratitude washed over Rebecca's face. That sounds perfect. So I'd have to interview properly, of course, prove my capabilities. Of course, I wouldn't have it any other way, and neither would Jennifer. Nathan paused. Are you sure about this? Working in the same company, seeing each other in professional settings. I think it could be healthy, actually. A way to re-establish a connection that's based on mutual respect and shared interests, separate from our history and our roles as Emma's parents. Rebecca smiled. Plus, I've missed having intellectual challenges, contributing to something meaningful. Before Nathan could respond, Mrs. Hudson called from inside, her tone brooking no argument. Dinner is served, and I will not be responsible for cold crab cakes. They shared a laugh at the housekeeper's familiar authoritarian kitchen manner. As they turned to go inside, Nathan gently touched Rebecca's arm. I think the job is a good idea. And I'm glad you're here, Rebecca. This weekend in our lives, all of it. The simple statement, delivered without drama or qualification, felt like a significant step forward. Dinner was a lively affair, with Emma dominating the conversation, her excitement about the weekend's planned activities. Beachcombing, the local aquarium, ice cream at the famous parlor in town, spilling over in a stream of enthusiastic chatter. Later, after Emma had been tucked into bed with promises of an early morning beach walk, Nathan and Rebecca found themselves alone again, this time in the living room, before a gently crackling fire that Mrs. Hudson had lit against the unseasonable chill. Wine? Nathan offered, holding up a bottle of the Bordeaux they had once shared on special occasions. Please, Rebecca accepted, settling onto the sofa. You still remember. Some things stay with you, he replied simply, pouring 2 glasses. As they sipped their wine, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in months, touching on Emma's education, developments at Blackwood Enterprises, books they'd read recently, and gradually more personal topics. Do you remember the first weekend we spent here? Rebecca asked, smiling at the memory. The plumbing was a disaster, and we ended up having to shower with buckets of heated water. Nathan laughed. And we slept on an air mattress because the furniture delivery was delayed. You were 6 months pregnant and kept rolling onto my side all night. The house has improved since then, Rebecca observed, looking around at the comfortable, well-appointed space. Many things have, Nathan replied, his tone more serious. Including me, I hope. Rebecca studied him over the rim of her glass. You were always a good man, Nathan. But yes, I see changes. You're more patient, more measured in your responses. Fatherhood suits you. And you're stronger than I remembered, more self-possessed. Nathan hesitated. I keep thinking about what Jackson said, the day after the wedding, that trauma and isolation change people's perceptions, their memories. They do, Rebecca acknowledged. For a long time I idealized our marriage, remembered only the perfect moments. It was a way of sustaining myself during the separation. She set down her wineglass. But therapy has helped me see things more clearly. We weren't perfect, Nathan. We had struggles, disagreements. We were still learning how to be partners when everything fell apart. I've been thinking about that too. How young we were, how much growing we still had to do. Nathan leaned forward. Maybe that's the silver lining in all this. We've had time to become more fully ourselves, to mature individually in ways we might not have together. The observation hung between them, pregnant with possibilities neither was quite ready to articulate. What happens after this weekend? Rebecca asked finally. We go back to the brownstone, continue our careful dance of co-parenting while maintaining emotional distance. Nathan considered the question. I don't know, he admitted. I'm still processing everything. But I do know that being here, seeing you with Emma, talking like this, it feels right in a way I didn't expect. It does, Rebecca agreed softly. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Nathan noticed Rebecca stifling a yawn. You should get some rest. Emma will have us up at dawn, demanding beach time regardless of the weather. They ascended the stairs together, pausing outside the master bedroom that would be Rebecca's for the weekend. Thank you for suggesting this trip, Nathan said. It was a good idea. Thank Emma. She's the mastermind behind Operation Family Reunion. Rebecca smiled. She's quite determined, our daughter. Wonder where she gets that from, Nathan teased, the familiar banter feeling both nostalgic and fresh. Good night, Nathan, Rebecca said, her hand resting briefly on his arm. Good night, Rebecca. As Nathan continued down the hall to the guest room, he felt lighter than he had in months. Nothing was resolved, nothing definitively settled, but something had shifted, a door previously closed, now standing slightly ajar. Morning arrived with bright sunshine and the sound of Emma's excited footsteps in the hallway. Nathan emerged from the guest room to find his daughter already dressed in beach attire, complete with a sun hat and plastic bucket. Daddy, the sun's out. Can we go to the beach now? Where's Mum? Is she awake? Mrs. Hudson made pancakes. The barrage of questions and statements made Nathan laugh. Slow down, Princess. Let's see if your mother is awake. Then we'll have breakfast and head to the beach. Rebecca's door opened at that moment, revealing her already dressed in casual beach clothes, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I'm awake and starving. Did someone mention pancakes? Emma grabbed both their hands, physically pulling them toward the stairs. Come on, Mrs. Hudson says the tide is perfect for shell collecting. Over breakfast, they planned their day. Beach in the morning, lunch at the local seafood shack Emma loved, the aquarium in the afternoon. Simple activities that any family might enjoy, yet imbued with significance for the three of them. On the beach, Emma raced ahead, chasing gulls and collecting shells, while Nathan and Rebecca walked at a more measured pace, their conversation flowing naturally between practical matters concerning Emma and more personal reflections. I've been thinking about what you said last night, Rebecca ventured. About us growing individually in ways we might not have together. Nathan nodded, encouraging her to continue. The woman I am now, she's different from the one you married, more independent, more certain of her own strength. Rebecca looked out at the ocean. For a long time I worried that if I ever made it back to you, you wouldn't recognize the person I'd become. Or worse, that you wouldn't like her. I'm getting to know her, Nathan replied thoughtfully. And I find her intriguing, admirable. He smiled. Still recognizably you, but with new dimensions. And you? How do you see yourself compared to 7 years ago? Nathan considered this. Less rigid, I think, more willing to adapt, to consider perspectives beyond my own. Emma taught me that, the necessity of flexibility, of sometimes letting go of control. Good lessons, Rebecca observed, ones I had to learn as well, though through different circumstances. They walked in companionable silence for a while, watching Emma dart back and forth along the shoreline, occasionally shouting excitedly about her discoveries. What do you want, Nathan? Rebecca asked suddenly. Not just for Emma or for practical arrangements, but for yourself, for your future. The directness of the question caught him off guard, but he appreciated her willingness to address the elephant that had been walking beside them for months. I want peace, he said after a moment. Not just the absence of conflict, but true contentment. Connection. For a long time I thought that wasn't possible without understanding what happened to you, without closure. Now I have answers, but closure isn't as simple as knowing the facts, Rebecca finished for him. Exactly. It's an ongoing process. Nathan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. What I'm realizing is that I don't want to close the book on us entirely. I want to see what might be possible now between the people we've become. Rebecca's eyes searched his, looking for certainty. Are you sure? There's no rush, Nathan. We can continue as we have been, focusing on Emma, giving ourselves more time. I'm not suggesting we jump into anything, just that we stop being quite so careful with each other, that we allow ourselves to explore the connection that's still there, without predetermined expectations about where it might lead. A small, hopeful smile curved Rebecca's lips. I'd like that. Emma's voice called to them from down the beach. Mom, Dad, look what I found. They turned to see her holding up a large, perfect sand dollar, her face alight with the simple joy of discovery. It's whole, she exclaimed as they approached. Mrs. Hudson says that's super rare and lucky. It is indeed, Rebecca agreed, examining the delicate find. I'm going to keep it in my special box, Emma declared, to remember this weekend, our first family weekend. The simple statement, delivered with a child's unfiltered honesty, resonated deeply with both parents. "The first of many," Nathan said, meeting Rebecca's eyes over their daughter's head. Rebecca nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. Whatever came next, the therapy sessions they'd discussed, the tentative steps toward rebuilding their relationship, the inevitable challenges of reconciling their past with their present, they would face it together, one day at a time. As they walked back toward the house, Emma skipping ahead with her precious sand dollar, Nathan reached for Rebecca's hand. She hesitated only briefly before intertwining her fingers with his, the gesture both a memory of what had been and a promise of what might still be. Nothing was certain. The road ahead would not be without obstacles. The scars of their 7-year separation would not fade overnight. But here, on this sun-drenched beach with their daughter's laughter carrying on the breeze, hope felt not just possible, but inevitable, a tide turning, bringing with it the promise of renewal. Fine as they reached the house, Emma ran ahead to show Mrs. Hudson her treasured sand dollar, leaving Nathan and Rebecca alone on the sun-dappled path. "I never thought we'd be here again," Rebecca admitted, her voice soft with wonder. Standing together, looking at the same horizon. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes the most beautiful vistas come after the hardest climbs." She smiled at him, the sunlight catching the gold in her eyes, the same eyes that had captivated him when they first met, that their daughter had inherited, that had witnessed both heartbreak and healing. "So we keep climbing?" she asked. "Together," he replied, "one step at a time." They continued toward the house where their daughter waited, her future and theirs unwritten but full of promise. The path forward wasn't clear or straight, but they had found each other again across an impossible distance, and perhaps that was enough of a miracle to build upon.